What's going on, beautiful people? What's going on? Great day to you all. We are jumping back into Reading with Jam. This feels like a PBS special. I love this. This is great. Anyways, so we are continuing our reading of Real Artists Don't Starve. Timeless Strategies for Thriving in the New Creative Age by Jeff Goins. So yesterday we finished chapter 2. Today we'll be reading and making our way through chapter 3. Thank you again, everybody who's been checking out Reading with Jam. I like this title. This is great. Thank you. Thank you everybody who's been hanging out with me, going back and watching the lives, and watching or listening to the reading. Hopefully you are liking the content that I'm reading. I think these are pretty good books. This is my first time reading this book, so while I'm reading it, this is my first time as well. So hopefully you are enjoying it. I appreciate it. Again, the likes, the shares, all that stuff. And for those who aren't catching up with me or keeping up with me on Instagram, I'm also uploading these to my voiceover channel on YouTube, which is Jamiel Cal-Pin VO, where I have some other content about voiceover and other work that I've done. So thank you, and hi. Thank you for joining in and watching and listening. But we're going to jump into it. Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. We are reading chapter 3 today. Chapter 3. Apprentice under a master. The starving artist believes talent is enough. The thriving artist apprentices under a master. Of such importance is early training. Virgil. Like a lot of people, Tia Link went to college but didn't know what she wanted to do afterward. Many of her friends were going to law school, which sounded promising. Even if you didn't want to be a lawyer, a law degree could be very versatile, they said. As it turns out, she recalled, that's totally not true. You can be a lawyer. Nonetheless, she followed her friend's advice and attended Stanford Law. After law school, she went to work for a big firm and soon found herself exhausted by the work. She took some time off to travel, hoping to go into another career when she returned. Anything other than law. Little did she know, however, her first career was just preparation for what was to come, and all of it would soon become useful to where she was headed. When she got back from her travels, Tia ended up back in law, joining a high-frequency trading law firm on Wall Street. It was there she met her second husband, Ben, with whom she eloped, but the new marriage quickly began to crumble. At that point, the young lawyer took a step back to evaluate her life, trying to understand her part in the things that had transpired and why she was so desperately unhappy in her day-to-day life. Her job wasn't fulfilling her, and she was coming home expecting a crumbling relationship to make her happy. It wasn't working. None of it was. Meanwhile, there was something she had always wondered about: acting. As a child, Tia loved performing. She had been so moved by some of her favorite movies that she couldn't help but wonder what it might be like to affect others in the same way. I had no idea if I would be good at it, she said. I had no idea I would even like it. But still, she had to try. Just for fun. Tia took a few acting classes to see what they were like. After her very first class, she was in love. It was like, this is where I'm supposed to be, she said. Everything started to make sense. Tia hadn't been training to become a lawyer. Not really. Law school was preparation for an entirely different vocation, though not entirely unlike that of being a lawyer. Without realizing it, Tia was training to be an actor. And now she was beginning to realize a lifelong dream she didn't even know she had. So much of what has come before has helped me succeed now, she said. As a lawyer, you learn everyone is faking it. I learned the appearance of confidence. Her transition to acting was anything but smooth. She had worked so long in a world that was logical and calculated that it was hard to dream again. Everything anyone had ever told her about being creative came rushing back to her. Foremost was that you don't succeed. An inner voice kept saying, you're crazy to think this is something you could do. You're too old to start something like this. The truth, though, is that her apprenticeship began as soon as she made the decision to become an artist. She was already on the path. She just needed to take the next step. There was little logic to Tia's curiosity about acting. Because of that, she didn't know how to proceed. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" she kept asking herself. It was at this point she could have gone all in on a crazy idea, or she could have been paralyzed with fear. Fortunately, she didn't either. Tia took her time, building a bridge in the direction of her dream, doing both acting and law for a couple of years, using whatever spare time she had. It was an informal apprenticeship that she designed herself. It began gradually with a few auditions here and there while continuing to practice law, but the more she pursued acting, the more she liked it, and the easier the gigs came. When I spoke with Tia, she was stepping out of a rehearsal in New York City. Today, she's a full-time actor, and in the past year alone, she's done 15 films, a fact that still surprises her. "It remains absolutely crazy to me," she said, "that even now acting is my job. It doesn't feel like work. There's this thing that gives me so much pleasure and so much joy." What got her there was not some lofty dream. It was gradual and persistent action in the right direction. She learned how to be an apprentice. The rule of apprenticeship. When we think of creative success, we tend to think in terms of extremes. You either make it or you don't. You leap and the next appears, or it doesn't. But the truth is a little more complicated. We love to praise the big break, that wonderful moment when the stars align and serendipity visits you, making you an instant success. We wait for such moments, even long for them. But here's the truth. The big break is a myth. Of course, we all get lucky at some point. But luck can be a fickle thing and nearly impossible to replicate. When those special moments come, we can embrace them, but we should never expect them. Creative success is far more often the result of hard work and perseverance. Starving artists wait for their big breaks. Thriving artists become apprentices in their crafts. This is what Tia Link was doing, albeit unknowingly, all those years in law school and after. She was learning the art of apprenticeship. By design, apprenticeship is hard. It's supposed to be. That's why so few people endure it. As Tia said, the work ethic certainly helps. There's definitely an opinion about actors that they're sort of lazy, lying around waiting for roles, and I can tell you I work longer hours than I ever have. What does an apprentice do? Whatever is needed. Becoming an apprentice is a choice, an attitude you start practicing today. The marks of a good apprentice are patience, perseverance, and humility. You are patient because you realize that though your big moment may not come today, if you put the work in, you will eventually see the results. You persevere because you know this will not be easy and the odds are stacked against you. But if you keep going, you will outlast the majority who quit at the first few signs of trouble. You are humble because you know how far you still have to go, and this attitude will earn the attention of masters who will want to invest in you and see you succeed. Not only does an apprentice not give up, they do what no one else is willing to do. It's hard, thankless work, but if you embrace it, in the end, you will be better for it. The moment we begin to believe we deserve success is the very moment it will elude us. We cannot wait for our lucky breaks. We must continually be earning. Luck may get you a break, but skill and a willingness to keep going are what will allow you to keep going. Apprenticeship may come in many forms, but one thing is certain, it must happen. You cannot become great on your own. You need help. The world doesn't need more amateurs subscribing to a fake-it-till-you-make-it ideology. We need more masters. The sushi chef who practices for a decade before opening his own restaurant. The golfer who endures thousands of hours serving as someone else's caddy. The musician who studies under a pop star for the greater part of a decade. Such experiences are not fun, but they are invaluable training for the future. We must always be practicing, always earning our stripes. Before we become masters, we must first become apprentices. approached the master with boldness. When the young Michelangelo approached Domenico Ghirlandaio, I'm terrible with names, Domenico Ghirlandaio, sure, the famous Florentine artist, he must have had a lump in his throat. Michelangelo was barely a teenager and was about to ask one of Florence's most fashionable painters to train him. What's more, the boy's father, Lodovico, was pressuring his teenage son to be the family's breadwinner. And what must have been a monumental moment for both men, Michelangelo met Ghirlandaio with a combination of fear and respect. Many young Florentines would have been honored to even meet the man, but the boy wanted more. As the story goes, he not only had the audacity to request an apprenticeship from the master, but he also asked to be paid. This was outrageous. In the Renaissance, apprentices did not get compensated. If anything, they often paid their way through such an education because of the opportunity. Anyone in I'm just going to call him G for right now. Anyone in G's studio witnessing the request surely stared in abject horror. Whatever the master must have felt at first, outrage or amusement, he surprised everyone, maybe even Michelangelo, with his willingness to accept the offer. Michelangelo assisted G in whatever his master needed. Perhaps just as important as the technical skills he developed in the studio, he also learned what it meant to be an artist of such stature. The responsibilities of running a studio, the challenges of managing apprentices, the social dynamics of dealing with patrons. This is most of what an apprenticeship is: watching, listening, and being present in the process. You experience by doing, and you internalize those lessons. And what must it have been like for G to take on Michelangelo? Here was a young man who stood out from the rest of the group. He was older than the other apprentices by a year or two. On top of that, G was paying him. Every time G gave the boy an assignment or saw him walking around the studio, he must have remembered. Here was the boy who had the audacity to ask. In Michelangelo's free time, he was allowed special access to G's drawings and paintings. He was free to copy them and learn his master's technique. And why not? Wouldn't you give your attention to a pupil who clearly had the boldness and ability to rise above his peers? Wouldn't such a student be hard to ignore? When the master saw the apprentice's rendition of his own work, G remarked that Michelangelo's were as good as the originals. How could such a thing be possible? How could such a thing be possible, though, if Michelangelo had never apprenticed before? Becoming an apprentice begins with your mindset. Long before entering G's studio, Michelangelo was practicing. He was not waiting for his big break. He was doing the work. That meant learning from whoever he could from an early age. He knew he wanted to be an artist and that he could not become great on his own, no matter how talented he might be. No amount of natural ability can compete with diligent practice. He had relatives who worked in the quarry every day, and he was able to familiarize himself with stone, a skill that would be invaluable to him later in life. He adopted the attitude of a student, learning from anyone who could teach him. About a year after Michelangelo's apprenticeship with G began, the patron, Lorenzo de Medici, requested two of G's students to be assigned to the Medici Palace as artists in residence. Who came to mind other than the audacious young man who had the boldness to ask and the ability to act? The young artist's time with the master was short but significant, and one that ultimately transformed him into Florence's most prominent artist. When Michelangelo moved to the Medici household, he studied under, Bertoldo di Giovanni, an artist who had learned from the great Donatello. The young artist found himself in the company of greatness. Lorenzo de Medici hosted regular dinner parties that included prominent figures from society, such as Niccolo Machiavelli. Once again, Michelangelo made himself a student, soaking up every lesson he could and applying it to his art. Excuse me. Certainly, we cannot overlook the importance of skill in the practice of apprenticeship, but skill is not enough to earn the attention of an influencer. You must be teachable, demonstrating not only your ability, but your potential. This is where boldness comes in, not just in making a request for an apprenticeship, but in the willingness to do what must be done. Being an apprentice is not just about making big asks, but being diligent enough to take the work seriously and continue growing. What will make you stand out from the crowd is not just the audacity to ask for help, but the humility to learn and act. Apprenticeship today. During the Renaissance, traditional apprenticeships lasted about a decade. By the time an apprentice was done studying under the master, 7 years had passed. During the following 3 years, an apprentice became a journeyman and struck out on his own to prove his worth to the world. This is a far cry from the standard summer-long internship college students experience. It's worth noting that very few apprentices made it to the master level. The difference between someone who made it and someone who did not ultimately came down to 2 factors: who helped them and how hard they worked. If they had a good master, they had an advantage. They knew someone who could help them find the right social connections to succeed. And if they did not, or if they didn't apply themselves, they were in a tough spot. In the end, perseverance paid off. But that was a long time ago. How, if at all, does apprenticeship work today? For starters, it's a lot less formal than in the past. Make no mistake, though, apprenticeship is still alive and well, albeit with a new form. The first step in an apprenticeship is to find a master worth studying. When you find such a person, consume as much of their work as possible. Read everything they've written, watch everything they do, and buy whatever they might be selling. Your goal is to familiarize yourself with their work. Then do exactly what they say. Follow their advice, apply their principles, and enact their method. Do this first without their knowing. Do whatever you can to model your skill after theirs. Learn the master's style so well that they can't help but be wowed. And don't be afraid to show your skill. They may find this endearing and be more likely to be drawn to you, eager to help you. This is when you ask for their help, their input, their advice. Not before. First become a case study, then ask for help. Don't pick their brain. Show them that you've done your homework and have put what they've modeled to good use. And now you want more. This is what Michelangelo did when he proved himself as a worthy apprentice, someone who would multiply G's investment of time. It's what good apprentices do. By becoming a case study, you become the ideal champion of their work, promoting everything they do simply by embodying it and broadcasting it to the world, which only serves to strengthen the master's reputation. Tia Link spent 3 years at a job she didn't like, because it afforded her the opportunity to apprentice in her true craft. The fact of the matter is these things take time, and when we try to rush the process, we end up missing valuable lessons along the way. Ending the apprenticeship. For all the perks of apprenticeship, they aren't supposed to last forever. At some point, you must graduate. You must end the apprenticeship and strike out on your own. If you never do this, you end up with a relationship in which you never create anything original, and it all becomes derivative, anemic work. Plus, apprenticeships don't usually pay much, if at all, so if you become stuck in one, you can end up starving. There comes a time when all the planning, all the preparation doesn't prepare you for the next moment, the moment in which you have to take your work seriously enough to succeed at it. When you are being called to that next level, you must respond appropriately. At times like these, you must become a little desperate, which describes Tia Link's state of mind when she was on the verge of quitting her law career to become an actor. As she put it, "I felt 60% excited to finally be following my dreams. 10% relieved just to be out of my lawyer job, 20% terrified I had made a big mistake, and 10% nervous about being poor. So what did she do? Did she quit her job and not look back? Not at all. That would have been foolish. She did something better, something we all must do. She entered a season of apprenticeship and chased her dream for 3 years while still holding down a full-time job. When you realize the career you're in isn't where you ultimately want to be, you may feel a similar sense of desperation. We tend to see desperation as a vice, something to avoid. When someone is desperate, we can sense it, and it repels us. But there is another kind of desperation, the kind that says, if this doesn't work, I will find another way. And that kind of desperation translates to passion, a powerful tool when directed at the right target. When that time comes, ask yourself, have I finished my apprenticeship yet? When Tia Link, the lawyer-turned-actress, finally left her job, she didn't have all the answers, but she knew it was time to move on. When she told her boss that she wanted to take a shot at acting full-time, she assured her boss that she would stick around until as many things as possible were properly transitioned. But Tia was quick to note she couldn't stay on indefinitely because I needed to get busy living. The attorney part of her apprenticeship was over, and now it was time to go pro in her commitment to becoming an actress. The job that at times had plagued her was, in its own way, a form of training. All her years of practicing law had prepared her for what was to come, and it was only then, in that transition, she realized she'd been training with the masters all along. Now she was qualified to become one herself. Tia quit law just before her 35th birthday. In her first year of acting, she did at least 5 commercials, filmed a full-length movie, acted in 3 short films, and started a couple of new classes. I just feel lighter, she told me over the phone, in between auditions. I feel happier. I don't pick up my phone and feel anxiety wash over me about what work email will come through. That's been the biggest change, the anxiety lifting from every second of every day. Becoming an actress was a choice that surprised everyone in Tia's family, including herself. I have never ever considered myself a creative person, she told me. For years, she pursued law because it was safe. I would have loved to leave earlier, she said, but I didn't know what I would leave to. We, as a society, are not really set up to give people a chance to explore other things in a safe way that lets them say, without judgment or fear, I'd just like to try this other thing for a little bit. When I asked Tia when she knew it was the right time to become an actor, she said, there is no right time. Finally, it just made more sense than it didn't. It's an inspiring story, but not a traditional one as we are inclined to think such tales should go. Rather, Tia Link's story is one of unexpected apprenticeship, involving years of effort, late nights of rehearsal and early mornings back at the day job. Of course, this was just a season, but a difficult one no less. There was little magic associated with this time, and very few breaks, if any. What Tia experienced was a typical apprenticeship, and you should expect nothing less in your own creative journey. Remember this: apprenticeship requires 3 important traits: patience, perseverance, and humility. You must be courageous enough to reach out to a master, but at the same time hard-working enough to not waste his time. When things don't go according to plan, do what must be done. And when it doesn't work out, be persistent. Keep showing up regardless of the outcome. Opportunities may come and go, but in the end, hard work is all we can measure. Artists starve because they think they can make it on their own, ignoring the need for a teacher. Thriving artists, on the other hand, are both humble enough to admit their need and audacious enough to seek it out. Great work is not a result of luck, but of a willingness to become an apprentice. That concludes Chapter 3 of Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Reading with Jam. I'll be back tomorrow to continue the book. We're making our way. We're making our way. You know what I'm saying? Making our way. So chapter 4 tomorrow. Thank you again, guys, for tuning in and liking and sharing and reviewing. Please leave some comments or anything to let me know of how I can improve. Is my pacing too slow? There need to be more variation in my tone and stuff like that. Let me know, because I'm practicing in public and I'm trying to get better at this. Thank you for the hearts. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the hearts. I appreciate it. But I will catch you guys later, and enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Yeah, today's Sunday, right? Anyways, see you guys later. Peace.